Before just giving out tips for what to do in the heat of the moment when someone shuts you down, we need to understand a few different things. And so wanted to spend the lunch talking about why we shut down in the first place. So when someone tells us no, naturally, a lot of us feel backed into a corner with nowhere to go. And that's when we say, okay, when can I call you next? Or when's a good time to call back, right? And that's the first sort of knee-jerk reaction a lot of times. So second would be why we shut others down. So in order to move forward, it's helpful for us to know why someone is telling us no. We think we know. We think we know based off of what they say, but usually there are deeper reasons behind it. And then, of course, why it's our responsibility. This is my favorite thing. I don't only think that it's okay to keep going once we've been told no, but like truly believe at my core that it's our responsibility, especially as salespeople or if you're trying to influence somebody in a manner that's going to help benefit them. It's our job to keep going. And then finally, 3 tips for moving past no. So the first one is why we shut down in the first place. And I think I put the word conditioning because I believe we've been conditioned, in a sense, since we were old enough to speak, to turn off when we hear the words no. Right? As soon as we could ask for anything from our parents, we heard no. And then later from our teachers, we heard no. And then from people we were interested in school. And then later, maybe college applications, if you're me. And then job interviews down the road. Like we've been hearing no for forever. And most of us have never tested the waters. So we've never experienced what it's like to hear someone tell us no, and then to keep going to get a yes. And these two things together are what cause us to usually shut down. And that's when the words come out, okay, when's a good time to call you again? Or, are you sure? That's like the worst thing that we can ask in the heat of the moment. Are you sure? This does nothing for them and nothing for us too. But we have nowhere else to go. So these things just end up coming out, right? So we've been conditioned ultimately to shut down. And then when we're on the opposite side of this, I believe that there's one root as to why we shut other people down. And this is in the context of an interaction where you're trying to get somebody to buy into whatever it is. Maybe it's advertising space, or it's a client you're trying to close, or it's the cybersecurity, right? That's what you're doing. Exactly. So ultimately, when we say no to people, we can say a multitude of things. We can say it's too expensive, now's not the right time, maybe next quarter. We prefer working with a different service provider that we know a little bit better because we have a relationship. Whatever the case may be, a lot of these are just almost smoke screens, you could say. And there is a deeper root to all of those objections, which is a lack of knowledge on the matter. And when we lack knowledge on a certain subject, usually this creates room for feelings like doubt, anxiety, and or fear. And when you feel that way, it's just easier for us to say no. And it's quicker. It's quicker than spending an undetermined amount of time trying to become more educated on the subject. I think some of us have probably been in that position before where someone's asked us if we're interested in buying something and, oh, no, I'm just looking. Or I'm just kind of getting quotes. We don't have all the tools necessary to make a decision. And it's easier for us just to go ahead and say no. So a great quote that I live by is when people say no, it's because they don't know enough yet to say yes. This may not be true 100% of the time, but it's pretty close. And there's a story that highlights this as well. And this is the reason why I believe it's okay and why it's our responsibility to move forward after we've been shut down. To start, why I believe it's okay to push past no. And I tell this story to people because over more than 10 years now of training salespeople, I've come back and asked them later, hey, how did those tips work on overcoming objections? And then people would ultimately vent to me and say, well, I didn't actually try them. Okay, why not? Because I felt like I was being pushy or rude. And I didn't want to be just another pushy, rude salesperson, or like an old car salesperson or whatever. And that's where the disconnect is, and that's why I tell this story to so many people. It's about a shoe store, but whether it's shoes, like the different types of sales I've done, have it been anything from selling an appointment to selling a multi-million-dollar contract for base makers. And out of everything I've experienced, this one person at this shoe store in Durango, Colorado has impressed me more than any person I've ever come across. And it's directly applicable to every single thing that we're doing today, whether it's ad sales or it's a lobbying firm or cybersecurity, whatever the case may be. But basically, I walked into this shoe store one day to get some new walk-in shoes. My feet were hurting, and I was doing door-to-door sales. So I pop in to get some new shoes. The guy comes up to me. I think his name was Brian. Comes up to me, asks if he can help me, and takes me over to the wall of shoes. And I told him what I was looking for. He pulled off a pair, and it was $200. And I said, absolutely no way. I'm here to spend $100 or less. I'm not dropping $200 on a pair of shoes today. All right, again, this is just shoes, but it is the same thing that you guys encounter in a different form. Somebody tells you your service is too expensive. Our natural inclination is to either try to offer a discount, to do whatever we can to hold on to that thing, right? We've got the fish on the line, so we offer the discount to try to keep them. Or maybe you just move on to a cheaper version of your product so you can get something to go back to the boss to and let them know that you got a sale. I tell this guy, Brian, it's too expensive, I'm not spending $200. He says, no problem, that's totally fine. And instead of moving on to a cheaper pair, he started asking me some questions about my life. Started asking me what I do for work, what I do for fun, and then asking me questions about any pain that I feel. And I told him, yeah, like I've always been the old geezer out of all my friends, like always aching everywhere. I said, I got back pain, I've got hip pain, I've got knee pain, I've got ankle pain, everything. And then he starts asking me about my sleep habits. And I'm like, dude, I'm not getting good sleep because literally my back's hurting every single night. And so he says, all right, walk over here with me. And he takes me to a pressure pad to stand on so he can look at my arches, and then films me walking on a treadmill so he can see my gait. And then after all of this, he says, I've got the perfect pair of shoes for you. And I was like, sweet, let's go. And we walk back over to the wall, and he pulls off the same $200 pair of shoes and hands them to me. And I laughed, and I was like, dude, what are you talking about? I just told you this is double what I wanted to spend. And then he looked me right in the eyes and said, Jake, you're tired during the day because you're not getting enough rest. And you're not getting enough rest because you said your back's hurting each night. Well, your back is above your hips, which also hurt. Those are above your knees, which also hurt. And those are above your ankles, which also hurt. And at the base of everything are your feet. And you're not taking care of your feet. And your current shoes aren't doing the trick. This pair of shoes will help you to feel better, get better sleep, and ultimately perform better. And then he said on top of all of that, your right foot has zero arch. And I'm assuming that's the foot you use to push when you're skateboarding on the skateboard. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like this guy just sized me up so quickly, but he also quickly identified over the course of maybe 15 minutes what the actual problem was, right? So I said, all right, man, I'll take the freaking shoes. And so as we're walking over to the cash register, he stops by the wall of insoles. I was like, dude, what are you doing? I'm already spending double what I wanted to spend. Like, let's just get out of here. And he's like, no, you need these insoles. And they were the most expensive pair, $50. He said, you need these insoles because they're going to fix that flat arch in your right foot. That also is causing the disalignment in your whole body because one foot is flattened out. So this will help both of them be the same, and you'll fix the entire alignment and feel better. So I left that day spending $250. Right, this is chump change compared to some of the contracts we're out there landing now. But I left spending more than double what I wanted to spend. And the biggest point is that I was ecstatic. I still to this day, this was 2013, I still buy those same insoles every time they wear out. I buy the same exact pair. And that guy, off a $250 sell, he probably made, I don't know, not much commission. Let's say he made $1,000 commission, which is impossible, but just for the sake of it. I still got the better end of the deal. because my joints did feel better, I did sleep better, I did perform better, everything. And I still buy the same insoles 6 years later. Like, I got the better end of the deal. So many times we're holding ourselves back because we feel like maybe we're taking advantage of them and we don't want to be pushy, and sometimes we could be almost bullying them into the sale. They're getting the better end of the deal. We have to remind ourselves that the customer is getting the better end of the deal. If they're not, your service or your product might not be as good as you think it is. It should be solving a problem in their life. So the two key points from this story are, one, we're empowering the person with the right knowledge to make the right decision. That's what Brian did with me. Second point is we're providing a solution to a problem that they have. So I didn't pay $250 for shoes that day. I paid $250 to rid myself of pain and to feel better. And it's directly applicable to what we do today. I sell services to food and beverage brands, some of the biggest in the country. They're not paying for us to go in and chat with the manager and try to improve the placement of their product. They're paying us because grocery stores are understaffed. Their shelves sit empty for hours at a time. They lose money, and cash is their most valuable asset right now as an emerging brand. So we're ultimately solving a much bigger problem. Same thing with lobbying, advertising, cybersecurity, whatever it may be. But if you think of it as you're just selling your good or your service, then I think you're going to be limiting yourselves. We need to identify the real problem. And if you keep getting small objections like it's too expensive, we're not interested right now, that means you haven't identified the real problem. Okay, so these are essentially here, those 2 points from earlier, to help build a foundation for why it's okay to move forward. We shouldn't even bother trying unless we understand why it's okay. The first tip, I think is great for you, because you mentioned that sometimes you get vague responses, if any response at all. Okay, so this is very simple. I'm not a rocket scientist, don't claim to be, but I think I'm good at the basics, and that's all I want to pass on to everybody here today, are some of the basics of selling. So the next time you're given an objection, too expensive, we're not comfortable with you or your product or your company, we like our other service provider better, now's not the right time, check back with us next quarter, whatever it is. Before you hang your hat and hang up the phone and say, no problem, when's a good time to call you back? We have to cut that out completely. Before you do that, try this tip, repeating the objection back to them in the form of a question. This seems maybe silly, maybe too simple, but hey, you got free pizza if nothing else today, right, if you're not satisfied with this, but I promise it will work. Repeating someone's objection back to them in the form of a question. Let's say you ask your boss for a raise. This is a form of selling, obviously, right? You're trying to persuade them on why you deserve a raise. Your boss says, nope, unfortunately, we can't give you a raise today. So how you would move forward is repeating this back in the form of a question, such as, oh, can't give me a raise right now? Again, very simple, but what you're doing is through body language and tonality, telling them that you need more information. And once you repeat their own statement back to them in the form of a question, they feel the need to justify it further with a deeper statement or a deeper reason behind it. And that deeper reason is going to give you tools that you need to ultimately get where you want to go. So continuing on this example, it's fictional, but I think it's realistic. You ask for the raise. Sorry, we can't give you the raise right now. Oh, I understand. You can't give me the raise right now? Unfortunately not. We launched those new branches last quarter, so our expenditures are a bit higher than normal, but we can have this conversation again in a quarter, or maybe 2 quarters from now. So if nothing else at this point, I think you've got 2 things. One, you can come back and argue that now is a more important time than ever for the company to take care of its people because there's more on the line with the new branches that it just opened. This is a new standpoint that you have. Second, if nothing else, you've at least locked in a date for a conversation down the road, right? Both of these are better than shutting down and walking away. But I bring up the second point about, or the first point about having a different argument now, because people don't change their minds. So next time you're on a phone call with a potential client, remember, they're not just going to change their mind. They give you an objection, you say, are you sure? They say, when you put it like that, you know what, we'll go ahead and sign. That never happens, right? So people don't change their minds, but they will make a new decision based off of new information. A new decision based off of new information. So when you repeat someone's objection back to them and they give you that deeper reason, that gives you the next pivot point essentially to bring new information to the table to help them make a new decision. Here's the second one. Asking for more information using a two-part question. So this is strategic, the way that you'll set this up. Most of us, for some reason, don't want to ask for more information. We assume that whatever we hear is final. And I think that comes back to what I was saying in the beginning about being conditioned to shut down after we've been rejected. But if you've built rapport with these potential clients or whomever over a period of time, it would be totally okay for you to ask for more information. But here's the two-part question. Keeping the same example of the raise. We can't give you a raise right now. Oh, totally understand where you're coming from. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that are preventing the raise from happening? I'm just asking because I'd love to know if there's anything I can do on my end in order for you to feel more comfortable approving the raise. So the first part, you're leaving the person out of that sentence because you're associating that sentence with the problem. The problem is you not getting the raise. That's why I didn't say, hey, just out of curiosity, what's preventing you from giving me the raise? This would be confrontational. Same thing with the client, right? What's preventing you from moving forward today? What's preventing this from happening? Leave them out of it. The second part is associated with the solution. That's where you bring them in. Hey, totally get that. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the things preventing the raise from happening? Just asking because I'd love to know if there's anything else I can do on my end in order for you to feel more comfortable approving it. You've brought them into the solution, and now you're reaching a win-win together. And it's not a win-lose, right? They are a part of the solution with you. Again, you can replace your boss or whomever in the story with a potential client, investor, whatever it may be. But the main point is asking for more information, leaving them out of the first sentence and bringing them into the second sentence. Here's the last tip, and then we'll be done. Open up for questions if you have any. But this is probably the method that I use the most often when I am in the heat of the moment with a potential client and there's a deal on the line. The first two tips are more helpful if you receive a vague objection, right? More along the lines of that smoke screen I was talking about. Now's not the right time. Let's talk later. It's too expensive, whatever it may be. Those are all vague and not really the root of the issue. This last one is better suited when they're direct with you. For example, we're not confident in your product. We're not comfortable with your company. We prefer one of your competitors. Or maybe they're not confident in you, right? We don't work with people we just met. We'd like to build a relationship with you over time. These are all fair. So this is where you pause. I think a lot of salespeople are trained to just offer up some quick fix and then close again, right? Going for the reclose, going for the reclose. This is what a lot of us hear. And this is understandable, but I think you're doing a lot of damage at this point because these people have given you their time. They've agreed to meet with you. They've sat through the presentation. They've listened to you, right? They've given you their time, and now it's our turn to give them our time. So when someone gives you an objection, let's say, hey, or they respond and say, hey, we appreciate this, but we just don't know you well enough, and we'd like to develop a relationship with our partners before we sign. That's very specific. You don't need to repeat that back to them, right? You've got it. What you do here is you pause, and you take time to reinforce the weak area, wherever it may be. If they told you they weren't confident in your company, you're reinforcing the company. If it's you or if it's your product, whatever it is, you're stopping the whole presentation and you're reinforcing that area. I like to do this in a more natural form if possible. If they tell me straight up, and this has happened multiple times, hey, this all sounds great, Jake, but we just don't, know you well enough. We'd like to build a relationship with you. Can we set a time to meet in person, maybe in 2 months from now, in a state I don't live in? I don't know if you guys get that, but that's happened to me, and that's ridiculous. You have to delay everything 2 months and then fly out to go meet with them. Most of us will just say yes and take that as finite. Okay, I guess that's what I've got to do to earn the deal. That's not the case. Things can happen sooner, right? So what I would do in this situation, what I've done in this situation, is pause, change the conversation for a bit. They're not comfortable with you, so shut up about the company. Let's just build some rapport between them and us, right? So at that point, I'll shift, ask them a question about themselves, because what do we all love talking about most? Us, right? So if I can get them talking about themselves for not even that long, 5 to 10 minutes, all of a sudden they become more comfortable with me. They didn't even learn anything more about me. They just talked about themselves for 5 to 10 minutes, but they're now more comfortable with me. But here's the reset part. I can't just jump right back into where I was at the end and say, hey, now that we've got a better relationship, are you guys ready to sign, right? Or something less forward than that. You still can't jump right in at the end. You have to reset all the way back to wherever the point was that was weak in the presentation. Normally we talk about ourselves in the beginning, right? And then maybe it's our company, and then maybe it's our product. So if they weren't comfortable with you, you have to reset all the way back to that first notch. If they were comfortable with you but not your company, you're resetting back to the company. Here's why. Simple example. You're going to buy a car, and the car salesman just seems like a sleazy guy that you can't trust. Some of us have probably come across this. If you feel like you can't trust the guy, then you probably won't trust what comes out of his mouth for the whole test drive. You're mentally checked out, and you've kind of maybe written that guy off. He could have even been giving you accurate and true information the entire drive about the features and benefits of the car, but you've written him off because you didn't trust him in the first place. Right? So it's the same exact reason here. Is that if they felt uncomfortable with us in the beginning, there is a very good chance that they checked out mentally for the rest of the presentation. So starting again right here will do us no good. We have to pause, reinforce the weak area, and then reset back. That could take another hour, it could take another, however long your presentation process is, but you have to reset back to the beginning. So altogether, you've got repeating the objection back in the form of a question. We've got asking for more information through a 2-part question, strategically. And then last, we've got the pause and the reset. Anybody have any questions so far about these?